Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LFC Transfer Room live stream with myself, Mick, Lewis, and Mihai. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today on our Monday night stream. We're very happy to have everybody here as it is at the moment, as we have a couple of juicy topics to get through for today. Thanks so much again for joining us, and hope everybody's doing well. And I'll throw it over to the rest of the panel, see how you guys are doing. Mihai, how are you doing, my friend? A little bit sad after Romania's lost to Ireland in the rugby, but it's okay. You've South Africa next. You're okay.
Every international break is sad when you're Romanian. Like for the last 20 years, this is the way it's been. I'm trying to understand now, and not to be too shocked when I'm telling people that the last time Romania was in a World Cup was the year I was born in '98. So yeah,
I'll be perfectly honest. Ireland isn't too far behind you, so we don't really have much to be talking about. Lewis, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm disappointed with the England result, but other than that, there's nothing really new, nothing going on. It's been quite slow, I think.
It has been very quiet over the past couple of weeks. Just a little bit slow on the news front, unfortunately, which is to be expected with the international break. But I know the real football is back, though, which is why I'm wearing this jersey. So I've that to look forward to, and that kept me entertained over the international break. Mick, how are you, my friend?
I'm not bad. Quiet week off work, so.
Oh, happy days!
That's good.
It's the best way. It's the best way to go about it, having a week off work. Perfect. So now that we'll get into a couple of topics that we have here. Evan Ferguson has come out and said in an interview that he had the opportunity to go on for trials at Liverpool, but decided to decline against it and go through Brighton. His explanation for it was purely because that Brighton gave him a clearer path, which I can't really see him being wrong in relation to that, along with the fact that he felt that Liverpool could just go buy a £70 million striker. I don't know where he heard that from because we've yet to do it, but that he wouldn't necessarily have been given a chance. And it's a fair assessment to make, considering that Liverpool aren't the team that could really put a 16, 17, 18-year-old in and depend on them when you're competing for silverware every year, unfortunately. But, Mihai, I'll ask yourself, do you even think there's even a sniff of him maybe coming to us in the future? Like his initial thoughts of, he's known as a Man United fan, but with the state of how their club is in at the moment, they may not be a club by the time he wants to leave Brighton. So do you think maybe that we have a shot there, or is this more of a Man City, Real Madrid realm of purchasing, or possibly even a Newcastle or Chelsea?
Did you feel a bit fuzzy inside saying about Real Madrid now, about an Irish player? I feel like, yeah. It's not really the type of transfer that CS make. And again, it's like with pretty much every player that's playing in the Premier League right now, and especially if they're close to England geographically, they're going to be pretty expensive. And I wouldn't see us spend, $100+ million on a player to really soon, which again, I'm just assuming that's what Brighton would want, like around 80, 100, because the way they've been selling in the last few years, I feel like that's pretty much the price tag, especially if he keeps performing the way he was and improving, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, he's not really. Also, like I feel in the near future, you wouldn't need to buy. I mean, maybe a winger, but we'll come to that later. But you don't really need to buy a lot of players up front, because we have now we actually do have quite a lot of options, and I don't think we need anyone else coming in too soon, especially for that kind of money.
Yeah, it's kind of a question of, if we did get him and he came in the next 2 to 3 years, where would he fit in, Mick? Like, do you see, would we have to sell somebody else? Because realistically, it'd be him. We really have too many cooks in the kitchen in that sense, with him coming in on that front line with the likes of Diaz, Jota, Gakpo, Nunes, Doak. I don't particularly myself see a place for him at the moment in there. Not that he doesn't have the quality for it, but I just don't know how we can provide substantial minutes to keep all of those players happy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think when he would have been on trial as well, he would have been in the time when we had the Fab 3 up front, so he wouldn't have had any chance of getting in anyway. But yeah, I don't see him more. I don't see him as a Liverpool player. I think he's got good quality. But yeah, I don't think we'd ever. I don't think we'd ever go for him. He's got Man United written all over him. If they can actually find some money to spend and not try and loan him. Yeah, but I think he's a really good player. I think he's a really good player, but I just don't think he's a Liverpool player, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement with you there, because I just like, maybe if we hadn't signed Nunez and maybe if we hadn't signed Gakpo and we were transitioning away from Salah in that range and we hadn't made those two signings, we could maybe even consider it at that point. But I just don't see where he fits in the squad here. Lewis, if you had to sell somebody, if he came out tomorrow and said I want Liverpool, and you had to sell somebody to get him outside of the obvious of being Salah, of the front partnership, who would you be happy to let go to get him in?
None of them really. I mean, at the moment, maybe Gakpo. I mean, he's definitely, none of them are bad. That's the problem. They're all great. It's just, of all of them, when I watch them, I think Gakpo's the one who does the least. I feel. I think Jota's he gets goals. Diaz is very much that Mane type of player. Gakpo, for me, I don't think he's found his rhythm yet. He's not found the role for him. Like, sometimes he's in midfield, sometimes he's a striker, sometimes he's like a false nine. I feel like he's the only one at the minute where there's no set position for him, same as when Nunez was there last season.
Yeah.
If there was ever a club that I think he'd go to, I think the Qataris who were trying to buy United, there was a report the other day saying that he might go to Tottenham. I think he'd be a Tottenham player. He's that type of out-and-out striker if he was going to go or fail and then Man United.
The Kane replacement. Do you reckon he might go to Man City after Haaland decides to jet off in 2027?
No, he's not a City type of... I don't really know how to describe... He's a
poacher.
He's a poacher. I mean, Haaland has that at times, but Haaland's a bit more physical. I don't think Evan Ferguson's got a lot of physicality about him. He's still only young. And to be fair, I think that's why the price is so high. Because the minute a young striker starts scoring, everyone goes, "Oh, he's worth 80 million." But you know, the amount of people we've had in the past where it's been like Bobby Duncan and Sam Yessel and Barini, you know, we've brought in all these young strikers and they just don't work. I just don't think he'd fit our system as such.
Yeah, I see. There's just, again, not to say that he doesn't have the talent to come in. Realistically, if we didn't buy Nunez, that's the role he'd take. And we already have Nunez embedded into the squad, and he's already developing into that squad as our future number 9 that's going to bag us 20 to 30 goals every season in the Premier League. And he's looking to be developing that way, which is fantastic. And he could be there for the next 7 or 8 years. So I think it's purely just a situation of circumstance. And Mihai, to be perfectly honest with you, he's not wrong in saying that he wouldn't have really gotten an opportunity at Liverpool. When you hear about Trent speaking about the academy and everything like that, it's very cutthroat. Like, you have 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds fighting against each other for spots on the squad that they may or may not get in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years' time. It's a very cutthroat world in the youth academies, and that somebody might. It's harsh for a 13-year-old to turn around and hear you're not good enough, and good luck, goodbye. You're not with us anymore. Go find a different club. Like, so he realistically with Liverpool, he's not wrong. Do you think he chose the right path with Brighton and his development?
I think it's the way he's been doing. I think it's pretty obvious that he did choose right. To kind of add to what you said, I think I feel like we would all love to be footballers, you know. We've kind of probably all of us, we grew up wishing we were one, we're going to be one, whatever. But to be honest, it's a lot more challenging than people maybe think, because again, as you said, you get a lot of rejection, and if you're not raised in a good environment, it's going to be hard on you. And especially, you know, you kind of have to give up nights out, partying, stuff like that. You don't get it. Like, you have to be a professional since you're 10, 12 if you want to have a chance to make it. It's not even a guarantee.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really tough, and good on him for making the good decision. I think he's playing Premier League football. He's doing great, and I think he's gonna maybe take Ireland to a final tournament.
Oh God, please let that be so, because if that happens, realistically, with the way the Irish football scene is going at the moment, and it's causing controversy at the moment in Stephen Kenny's tactics and everything, but people don't seem to realise that the failure of the FAI, which is the Irish Federation of Football, goes all the way down to grassroots. Like, that's why we basically, and this is not to put a stinger or a dampener on any players that have played for Ireland that came from the English system, that use like grandparents and passports and whatnot to play for us, but it's essentially English rejects that have gone through the Irish squad. So, but thankfully, there's been nearly €1 billion invested into it, and it's going to take the next 10 years, and most of that is going to grassroots. So hopefully, over the next 10 years, we start to see more players like Evan Ferguson coming through, and Gavin Bazunu and Caoimhín Kelleher coming through as well. But it's them three at the moment, and nobody else. And when two of your star boys of the future are keepers, you've a little bit to worry about there for going forward, which I find hilarious, is the fact that we could have had a midfield of Jude Bellingham, Jack Grealish, and Declan Rice, which boggles my mind. But it's anyways. How much do you think he goes for, and when do you think he goes?
I think he'll be at Brighton for maybe another 2 seasons. This season, maybe another one. Unless you see someone like Chelsea coming in, because they do need a striker. And they're offering silly money. I mean, Brighton are going to want. Brighton probably value him more than Caicedo, so he's going to be pushing between 100 and 120 million. Like, I'd be probably pushing upwards of 120 million. I'd say he's a striker as well. They need one. He's young, and they'll just go and spend the money, but he'll go and ruin his career if he goes there. So.
Yeah, I think so. Which was something that I find funny, and it's a statistic that I think is just it blows people's minds when they hear it. Is that, and I think I've said it before on stream too, that if Evan Ferguson, there's a sell-on clause in his contract with the team that he came from Ireland from, which is Bohemians in Dublin, and there's a sell-on clause, and if he goes for and it's rumored that if he goes for somewhere in the same region as Caicedo, about the 120 million mark. Bohemians get 20 million of that, and that's the equivalent of winning the League of Ireland 106 times, which is absolutely bonkers. That would fund the league. That's essentially the same. So if you can think about it, if you put it in contextual value, it'd be like somebody winning the Premier League 106 times, and that's a sixth of what the player would be worth. So it's mind-boggling to see. Just to answer the Hawk Lord. So did he have doubts about his ability to break into the first team? Sounds a bit like that by what he says. Yes and no. It wasn't so much doubts about his ability to break into the first team, more so he wouldn't have been given a chance to do so. Because as we mentioned earlier, I don't know if you heard it or not, it's very hard for a team like Liverpool that's competing for silverware every year to put in a 17 or an 18-year-old at a striker and then let them develop and let them make the mistakes in game time, because we don't have the ability to do that.
It's like when Graham Brooks and he went to Sheffield. Like, he could have easily stayed. Like, he was in the Community Shield. He could have easily been the backup, but he wanted to go to Sheffield and try and get first team football. Yeah,
it's essentially the easiest way to say it is he wanted an easy way through to the first team, but it's also wrong in describing it that way. That is it, and it's brass tacks, but he needed a pathway through to a first team that would have allowed him to develop in such a way that he could make a first team and give him the opportunity to get there. So hopefully that answers your question, Hawklord, because it's not so much that he didn't think he could break through to the first team, more so he wouldn't have been given the opportunity to do so. So, and if you've ever heard Trent go on about how the youth team was when he was 12, 13 years old, it's cutthroat. So he could have very easily faltered and not become the player that he was. So I think he made a fantastic choice as it is. As much as it pains me for him not to be a Liverpool player, he took his development into his own hands, and he's now going to be one of Ireland, the face of Irish football for the next 10, 15 years, easily. Just want to point out, guys, we nearly have 50 people in here watching us at the moment. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe. If you have done that already, please do share the video. If you've done that, please make sure your notifications bell is on so that you can get notified for every future video on stream with ourselves as well. Thank you so much for everybody that's watching too. To move on to our second topic, it is the Reds admiring Jarrod Bowen. Now, that's been the spinning wheel of anagrams for the whole of summer. We've admired, we've looked at, we've checked out, we've scouted. The thesaurus was out in force over the summer with who we would be looking at. Lewis, do you think this could be a potential replacement for Salah if and when he goes? And if so, is it a direct replacement, or is it more we're transitioning to Darwin Núñez being the funds of our goals?
Yeah, I think the transition. You never, like Nick said before, you're never ever going to replace Salah. There's no point in trying. I think what happened with him was a once in a blue moon, never going to happen again thing, or at least it won't for a long, long time. The only thing I've got with Bowen is I think his stats sort of get overhyped. I think he had one season where he got like 10 goals and 10 assists or something, which is great. But for a squad, for like a rotation, you know, he's going to cost, what, 60, 70 million? West Ham are going to hike the price up. That's a lot of money just for someone who's not, he might not live up to the expectation. If he's a rotation player, then, you know, it's still a lot of money. And I think we've got enough. If we're talking about players not getting their opportunity to get into the team, I'd rather have Ben Doak play more games than sign someone who's just going to stunt his development when there's so much hype on him. You're talking about Evan Ferguson being the face of Ireland. Ben Doak, if he carried on with all the hype that he's been getting, he could be the face of Scotland too. So he's good. I do think he's really good. But in the time he's been at West Ham, he's never... I personally have not seen a lot of them where I think, well, I'd love to have him in the team. He doesn't strike me as higher than maybe like a Tottenham or more recently like an Aston Villa or something. I just don't think I think he'd struggle in a dressing room full of big characters, especially like around Liverpool.
Yeah, it's a funny one because I think Ben Doak is the perfect replacement for Salah. And the reason I say that is because we're transitioning away from a winger being a source of 30 to 40 goals a season. And we're moving more towards a traditional number 9 and a striker in the middle. And I think Ben Doak being a right footer as well allows us to develop Darwin in such a way that he's the key striker. It's purely because the movement into the newer system, and I see what you mean, Paul, by saying that Bowen is being discussed because he's left-footed. But I think if we're transitioning towards Darwin Núñez being the key striker going forward, you need somebody that's a right footer that can swing across in and dribble in and then distribute the ball. And Ben Doak has that in spades. He has no. Yeah. He has no fear in him whatsoever. He'll take on anybody, and that puts the fear of God into most centre backs and most left backs, which is fantastic. It's what you want. But on the opposite side, Mihai, do you see Jarrod Bowen being able to come in? Would you be happy with that as a purchase, or given the price that they're going to ask for, or would you just rather see, if and when Salah goes, the money that's used there, would you rather see it invested in other parts of the team?
First of all, before I get into that, I'd like to give a shout out to Muse in the comments, who was commenting last week from the Bahamas. So yeah,
goddamn,
good for you, lucky you. Yeah, hopefully you're back.
Do you have any spare tickets?
So yeah. About the Bowen thing. The thing is, with Bowen, I do have a very special relationship because I triple captained him in FPL a few seasons ago. He got me 21 points, so 63 in total. So I cannot say anything bad about Jarrod Bowen. The thing is, realistically though, there's no point in signing Bowen. First of all, because of, as Lewis said about Ben Doak, who's going to break in the team and get a lot more minutes in the future. And also West Ham are going to ask for a lot of money. We've seen what they did with Rice being sold for 100 million, which is so I guess they'll probably ask for the same with Bowen, and I just don't see the point. I feel like if you have, like, realistically, if you want to sign Bowen, at least 80 million you're gonna have to spend, and like those 80 million could do, we could do with other players in other positions coming in.
Yeah, I think it's better to facilitate the other positions, to be perfectly honest with you. And Paul makes a point here to say Doak would demand a complete system change from the 4-3-3 to a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1. I doubt Klopp would do that. But if you think about it, the signings of midfield is actually hinting at that's going to be the new thing. We don't have necessarily an out-and-out six. We have Gravenberch, Endo. Now, Endo plays as a CDM, but I wouldn't necessarily call him a destroyer of a six. We then have Trent that can move in there and play a double pivot. Alexis McAllister can fall back into that role, and we can move Gravenberch up further. It seems Szoboszlai can fall back into one of them positions too. So it's once or twice is maybe a coincidence, but when everything is kind of pointing towards that, it leads you to believe that could be the way it goes. And if that is the case, then that would also allow the likes of a Cody Gakpo and a Darwin Núñez to play in the same side. So the question really is, and I'll pose this to yourself, Mick, is are we trying to replace Salah or his production? And how do you think we go about that?
I am completely opposite. I actually love Jarrod Bowen, mate. I think he's a fantastic player. I would actually love Liverpool to sign Jarrod Bowen. I think he'd add... The problem I have with Ben Doak is he's very young. And just to say, right, say, for example, Salah leaves in January, and then you throw Ben Doak in the team. I don't see how that can... That's a lot he's got to live up to then as a young player. Because in his eyes, you're playing in Salah's position if he's not there. He's going to get compared to Salah. And that is such a massive to put on such a young player's shoulders. I just don't see Doak coming in as a first-team player in the next 1 to 2 years. I just don't see it. But Bowen, I think he's fantastic. I think he would jump straight. If Salah's not there, obviously, he jumps straight into Liverpool's team. I think he adds a completely different style of play, which I think we're trying to lean towards, where Núñez will be the goal scorer and not relying on our wingers to do it for us. And I think Bowen in that role, I think he's a bit like... I think Harvey Elliott would do well in that role over Ben Doak. Because Harvey Elliott, if you play that way, your wingers are coming a bit deeper for the ball and trying to link the play instead of they're the ones going forward to get the goal.
Yeah.
Harvey Elliott and Jarrod Bowen, they're fantastic players to do that, both of them, over, say, a Ben Doak. But, yeah, I love Jarrod Bowen. I'm a fanboy of Jarrod Bowen. Every time I see him play, I'm just like, oh, what a player.
Well, there's a comment then that was saying that, well, there was Tim. There was one that's saying, don't put Doak in, just convert a left winger to a right winger. That's enough. I don't think Doak would immediately jump in. I think we'd put someone like maybe Jota on the right, or maybe Núñez on the right, because we saw him on the wing last season. And then another one was saying, oh, he has to prove himself, but can't prove himself because Salah is, let's say, he's possibly the best right winger in the world. He's never going to play over him, so he hasn't had the chance to prove himself. Only, I think, the Europa League. See how he gets on coming up to the January window, and then next summer, if we are going to sell him, that should be the time. And maybe by then, he might be capable of, deputising that role.
Yeah, there was a lot of reports that came out that we're not even going to consider Salah going in January if we're anywhere close to a top four or a title fight. And realistically, the way the league is looking at the moment and the way that we've played over the first 4 games, getting very, very hard-earned points, I could very much see us challenging for the top 2 positions. And if City get another knock or two, without any serious reinforcements come January, and that Matheus Núñez signing really tells me that Kevin De Bruyne's days are very much numbered in that squad, not because of a lack of quality, but because of injury issues and availability issues. On his day, Kevin De Bruyne is the single best midfielder in the world. So it's nothing got to do with that. It's more so got to do with availability being the best ability. And if he's out for 6-7 months of your season, you might as well just chalk him out for the season, because it's going to take him a while to come back anyway. Same with Nkunku with Chelsea. That's an injury that takes 6 months to come back from in theory, but the mentality side of it too is going to take ages to come back from too, and you won't be right until next year. So you might as well just scratch the year off at that rate. It's an interesting thing to think about of how we would go about replacing Mohamed Salah, because to be perfectly honest, I think this is the ample opportunity for FSG and Klopp to play Moneyball and use the money that they'd get from selling such an absolute talisman of a player to then replace him in the aggregate. So Nunez would chip in, Diaz would chip in, Jota, Gakpo, Szoboszlai. You're replacing the production rather than the player itself. Because if you try and replace Mohamed Salah, the only person that could possibly do that is Kylian Mbappe. And even at that, Kylian Mbappe could land in the Premier League and flop. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's very excuse me. It's interesting times for Liverpool currently at the moment, and I'd be very interested to see how we are in January, and if we do start hearing more rumblings of it, because it'll be another month of stress that we're going to have in January, waiting for him to be told, yeah, he's not going anywhere. But I digress, and we move on to a different sort of a replacement that we were looking at in the middle of the summer this year in Eljif Elmas from Napoli. He is a 5'11" midfielder and left winger. He sometimes played as a centre forward as well for Napoli. His profile seems to fit a cross between Dominic Szoboszlai and Alexis McAllister, in that he's a very good passer with the ball, but he's not the greatest in defending or pressing. Lewis, I'll throw it over to yourself first. £30 million or €30 million, I can't remember which is what we spent for him or tried to spend for him.
Euro.
It was Euro.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mick. Do you think that was a decent buy if we were to get him, or was it a decent try at a bit of business? Or give me a couple of your thoughts on the player yourself if you know anything about him.
I mean, for that amount of money, it's in the market today. I'm not being funny, but if Caicedo's 115 million, if this guy's around 30 euros, which is what, 25 million, something, 26 million, that it's a bargain. But my only thought to it is, well, there's two. One, the fact that he plays in so many different positions tells me that he hasn't got a settled one. And I prefer someone who is cut out for one. I'd rather him be fully good at one thing than half good at five. If I want him to come in and be just a midfielder, the winger thing doesn't really. And my only other thing as well is, say we signed him, who wouldn't we have signed? Would we have not signed McAllister or Szoboszlai? If it was going to be one of them two. And personally, I think they're both better players. I think they do more for the team than he would. I don't know a great deal about him, but from stuff I've seen, he looks good, but I wouldn't change the two that we signed in that position, or Gravenberch even, for him. I think we were linked with so many midfielders over the summer that if you go through that list, about half of them wouldn't have been good enough. And he, in my opinion, just sort of falls into that bracket. He looks decent, but not too upset about missing him if we did.
Yeah, nor would I, considering I gave him a little bit of a watch before coming onto the stream. And Mihai, he's a fantastic passer, very good at distributing the ball. Very much reminds me of Thiago, very much like the Andre signing that we're trying to get, hopefully working in January. So I guess he could have been, if we felt the Andre deal was falling through, he could have been the other option that we were trying to get there. Is there anybody out of the current four that we've signed in the midfield that you would have replaced him with, be it Szoboszlai, McAllister, Gravenberch, or even Endo? Like I think we got a very, very balanced four in midfield in the signings of the summer, or do you think there's anybody that you would have swapped out for Elmas in that?
No, I keep the four that we've got. I think I'm happy. They all do different roles, and what they do is great. There's you've got Szoboszlai, he's clearly can score a goal, he's energetic, he goes on the wing, he'll cut inside, he's a good crosser of the ball. McAllister can come deep, but he's a really good playmaker as well. Endo's just a brick in midfield, essentially. He breaks up play. And then you've got Gravenberch, who, from what we've heard, he's similar to the way Wijnaldum used to play.
Yeah.
So, of the four that we've got, I'm happy with them. There's not one that I'd take out for this player who I don't know a great deal about him. And I think if he was good enough for the team, we'd have heard more of him. So I'm happy with the ones we've got. I wouldn't change any of them at the moment.
Yeah, Mihai, with yourself, is there anybody that you would have changed on that? Are you happy with the signings that we've got? Would you have gone anywhere near him? Are you sad about missing him, or is it more of I'm happy with the four boys that we got? We can take this midfield, and this is another midfield that we could have for the next 5-10 years.
I think I'm just gonna go back to some of the points I've made over the summer. I think if our scouting team has identified these players, honestly, the only one that I didn't know a lot about was Endo. So, I mean, if we would have gotten, I don't know, Elmas, I would have said the same thing that I'm saying about Endo. I think, if our scouting team has identified him as a good match, then that's it. I won't pretend I know more than them. And I'm not really, I don't know. I do have a mate who's a Napoli fan, who's I've talked about some of their players with him, but Elmas wasn't necessarily a part of the conversation a lot of times. So yeah, I can't say I'm upset with missing out on him.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement there. It's not somebody I would have had very high up the radar myself. To be perfectly honest with you, he's kind of like a McAllister Thiago mix, and that's not to say that he's not a good player. He is, but as Lewis mentioned, he doesn't necessarily have a set position because he plays in about 3 or 4, and we have enough players on the team at the moment that can play multiple positions. So we'd only be diluting it further. But the Hawk Lord makes a great point here that I thought now as well. I don't know why we didn't just buy Andre and loan him back to his team till their season ended, and then we would have at least secured him for us. Do you think that even was on the table for Andre, or is that something, or is it just a matter of Fluminense themselves being like, we don't want his head turned at all. We want him focused on their Champions League version of a competition. Do you even think that might have been discussed at all?
Possibly, but I'm in that. I don't know why Liverpool didn't, at least, because there was nothing that we even attempted to do it. I thought that would have been probably the best way to do it. I mean, you can't really say, for me, like, yeah, you're going to join Liverpool in January, but your focus is still on your team until January. And he's made it, I think he made a statement anyway that he was fully focused on the team anyway and their accomplishments. So I don't think that's just something for him to look forward to. So I don't know why we haven't done that. And it's made me feel that I don't think we'll go back in for him in January, which is a shame because I feel like we should have wrapped that deal up for January because they were never going to sell him in the summer to us because they've got their own ambitions, what they want to go for, and he's the best player. But yeah, I think that would have been the best outcome for Andre, for Liverpool to do that, unless they go back in December, November, December time and try and tie it up then. But yeah, that made me think when I haven't put anything in place that we may not go back in from in January. I've got a feeling he might go to another club, like someone like West Ham, Villa level, maybe.
Now, in fairness, the Fluminense president came out and said that we offered them about 30 million euro, and they did turn it down when they said, look, we're not selling them now. You can either buy him now and get him in January, or you can talk to us in December and we talk about January. So they seem to be very open to selling him to us, and it seems to still be on the cards considering the president has come out and said that. So it could be something that happens. I know our own Matty had a conversation with one of the Fluminense journalists over there, one of their sources over there, and Andre is very keen on Liverpool, so it wouldn't necessarily shock me that if something did turn around in January and it happened somewhat similar to an Endo, where it just happened very, very quickly, and we didn't necessarily see anything about it coming. But we'll move on to the last topic that we have. It's a bit of a juicy one, and it's in relation to our very own Mohamed Salah. What I'm going to do is I'll throw it to the chat as well, and I'll see who you guys come up with. But the question essentially is that I have two questions. The second one's a bit of a juicier question. The first question is who would you replace him with, and are you trying to replace Salah or the production? So I'll throw it to yourself, Lewis, first on this. Who would you replace Salah with if you were trying to replace him on production, and if you were trying to replace the production, how would you do it, if that makes sense? So if you had to sign somebody to straight up replace him, or would you fund the money into the rest of the squad and allow it to be reproduced in the aggregate by all of the other players?
I fund it into every other position. If you're going to bring in a winger, so say if it's, I'd rather use the money to strengthen centre backs because we're desperate. Matip's going to go. Canate is injury prone. Van Dijk's starting to fade a little bit. If it's someone who I think is going to match the production and you're just going, right, we've got 200 million, let's get a winger, I've always said Saka. I think he's ideal if you want to. He's got longevity, not injury prone. I think that's one of Salah's underrated qualities is he doesn't get injured. He's very physically fit. Saka's the same sort of thing. Score goals, and he's great assist. He likes to cut inside. He'd cost a fortune, but I think that if you were looking for an out-and-out replacement, Saka would be the one. The only other winger I can really think of who I'd love Matoma. I think he'd be amazing. And one thing that doesn't get talked about enough is if you lose Salah, I know this is a bit of a PR side of it, but you lose your most marketable player, like who gets the highest, who sells the most kit with the name on, who's the most marketable player in Africa and those kind of countries. If you had someone like Matoma who would cater towards the Asian market, Japanese market, there's a lot of extra money coming in from that as well. So I think from behind the scenes and on the pitch, he would be a great signing if Salah was to go. But I prefer to invest it in the rest of the team. But they're the two that I'd pick if it was we want an out-and-out winger replacement.
Yeah, it's a funny one because you have two options. You can either try and replace him directly, or you can try and spread his production across either one signing, multiple signings, or the other players. Mihai, who would you give me two options that you think? We're getting a load of them here in the comments as well. Give me two options that you think we could go for. Excuse me. If we were to lose Salah come next summer.
I've seen a lot of links with Bakayoko from PSV. Now, to be honest, I haven't watched him. I haven't yet watched him a lot, so I don't know about him. But I do have an interesting one that I would like to explore, maybe. I've said it last week, I think. I would replace Mo Salah with Florentino Luis, play him in DM with McAllister and Gravenberch, and play Szoboszlai on the right wing. He's played there for Hungary. He's done pretty good there for Hungary. And I think he could do a really good job for us as well. Now, this might be an interesting one. I don't know. I haven't really seen a lot of it. So I don't know if it's popular or how people take it. But I do feel like Szoboszlai could do well on the wing. And I feel like he could. I mean, the only problem I have with it talking about it is that he's been a lot better than I thought we maybe expected him to be from the get-go. Like, we knew he was a world-class player, but maybe we thought, I don't know, he maybe needs a few months of season maybe to get going. But he's been so good for us from the beginning, and I feel like maybe if we put him on the wing, then do we get someone as good in midfield to cover?
It's an interesting take, to be honest with you. I would agree with you because at Leipzig they played a 4-2-3-1 sort of a formation, and he was on the right hand side of that midfield three. So it's not out of the realm of possibility at all that he could fall into that position. So I could very, very easily see that happening. And there's people obviously disagreeing with you. Paul saying he's the new Jarrod in quotations. He wouldn't move him onto the wing. Jarrod could play on the wing too, but it's interesting. And Mick, realistically, if you were to move Szoboszlai over to the wing and get a Florento Luis or somebody in as a CDM, and then have Gravenberch and your McAllister as your midfielders, where would you pump the rest of that money? Or is there anybody else that you think yourself could come in and replace that?
There's not. I don't think there's any player who could replace Salah for out and out what he brings to the team in his goals and his assists. And I don't think there's anyone who can actually replace him in that sense. But Liverpool aren't going to go and buy like a Saka. It's just never going to happen. It would cost them far too much money, and Arsenal would never ever sell them to Liverpool in a million years. We'd never get someone like Rodrigo from Real Madrid, because we don't buy players from Real Madrid. We sell players to Real Madrid. And I think we'd be more like Bakayoko's a very good young player. I've seen it I think in the Euro qualifiers for the Champions League. For the Champions League, he absolutely destroyed some of them teams, and he is a really good player, and I do like him. And I think that's why he has rejected Brentford, not because he's going to Liverpool. I think he's holding out for a bigger move, because I think maybe his agent said there is bigger teams who are interested in you. I think that's more of a realistic path that Liverpool would take, is buying someone like Bakayoko, and then buying. They need centre backs, get a couple of centre. They need a right back, and then just strengthen them that way. But yeah, Szoboszlai plays, as far as I'm aware, predominantly he played as a winger for Leipzig, and he plays that for Hungary as well. Predominantly, it's only I think we play him more as a central. But I think when people say, "Oh, he's not a winger," maybe you look at it as like a Salah winger. He wouldn't be a winger like Salah or Diaz. He would be a much deeper winger, and he's got that power to break the lines. He's got pace, and he's got explosive acceleration. So I do like the Szoboszlai more. I'm not saying a right winger. I'm saying like a more of a higher right-sided midfielder than an out-and-out winger. And then you've got your Gravenberch and then sign maybe. And then you've probably got Andre. If you sign Andre, drop him in that deeper role. I think that'd be very good. And then maybe sign a youngster like Bakayoko, and then you've got to strengthen the defence and like right back, couple of centre-backs maybe. But I don't think we need anything up front, like in the forward positions, unless Salah goes and you just buy like a youngster like Bakayoko and give him some game time, see how he gets on.
Yeah, it's realistically our front three and our midfield three are now fine. We need to focus on on our centre backs and maybe even an out and out six. And thankfully we don't need to focus on a goalkeeper for another 7 or 8 years with the lifespan of keepers these days. It's an interesting thing because it's leaning more and more towards what we mentioned earlier in relation to the 4-2-3-1, in that we would have deeper lying midfielders. And I think Diaz could play that role because he's been doing it an awful lot this season, in that he's getting the ball an awful lot deeper rather than on the edge of the box where he would normally be getting it. He's getting it about 20 yards back and then progressing towards the box that way, or overlapping around the outside of Andy Robertson, which is what Henderson used to do with Salah. He used to overlap around the outside of him, which is what Szoboszlai can do as well. He's fantastic at doing it. But it's a hard one to even try and quantify, purely because you're trying to replace the irreplaceable in Mohamed Salah. It's something that just can't be done. He is an enigma. He's a unicorn. You're never going to find another right winger like him in the next 20, 30 years. He's a generational talent, and we just happen to be lucky enough to be able to get him. But I do think there are players out there that we can get that can help replace him in the aggregate. And the question now that I'm going to pose to everybody here, and the guys heard it before the stream as well, and I'm going to throw it to you guys in the chat as well. If Salah goes in January for 200 million, would you be happy with that? if we were to hire Michael Edwards to spend that 200 million over January and the next summer window? I'll start with yourself, Mihai, on that. So I'll repeat it. So if Salah was to go in January and you were happy with that, would you only let him go on the premise that we were able to hire Michael Edwards to come in and spend that money in the January and summer window?
I think it depends on how you want to look at it. If you think Mo leaves in the summer, then you kind of have to think about it. If you sell him in January, it's like, okay, you miss out on 6 more months. You could have held on to him. But if you get Michael Edwards in, then you have a plan for the next 2 seasons. And you feel like we're turning back into ourselves, with actually having a plan at like this summer transfer window. So I would actually take it. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because like if Edwards came back and it was him and Klopp and Ward as well is another one that was a very big key to that trifecta of all of our major signings that we developed into monsters, the likes of Firmino. I say Firmino, he was there when Klopp came in, or maybe he was one of the first big signings that Klopp got. The Sadio Mane signing, the Virgil van Dijk signing, the Mohamed Salah signing, even though we were in for him when he was with Basel, and then he went to Chelsea, and then he went to Roma, and then he came back to us. And then Alisson as well on top of it. Like there's so many signings there. I really think the only bad signing we had was Naby Keita, and that came down to injuries. Maybe Oxlade-Chamberlain as well, but that was also injuries. Mick, I'll throw the same question to you. If Salah was to go in January, would you let it happen if we got Michael Edwards in to spend the money in that January window and that summer window, around the £200 million mark?
I think it depends on where we are if we are battling for a title, then no. If we're hovering around comfortably in like a third place, then possibly yes, because you're not going to get 200 million from in the summer. I don't know. It's such a hard question because selling Salah without giving him a farewell is just it's
sacrilege.
It's disgraceful. It's like no one. He's off at AFCON and then we sell him and then that's it. We never see him again. No, I couldn't deal with it. I don't think.
I think there'd be a lot of heartbroken people in Anfield.
Yeah, so I think it depends on where we are in the season at that time. If we're challenging for a title, and then you just can't get rid. You can't sell him because we would need him, obviously, to push for a title.
Yeah, that's the crux of it, really. Because would you be confident enough that we could get in replacements to cover Salah's production in that January transfer window to allow us to continue to push forward and compete for a title? Lewis, again, the same question to yourself. If Salah was to go in January for 200 million, 150 million, 200 million pounds, and the pretext of it was that Michael Edwards was to come back in and spend the money in the January and the summer transfer window, would you be happy with accepting that, knowing the context of how good Michael Edwards was in our system of getting players in?
I think it depends on two things. I think what we're competing for in the league, where we are, and if he's got players in mind that he wants to get. Because it's so easy to go, he'll come in and just fix all the problems. But say we sell Salah and the goals die a death, like we lose loads of them, we might go into panic mode and go, we need to just sign anyone, just sign this player. If we sort of have time beforehand and say, right, this is the shortlist we've got, here's X, Y, and Z. If we can get any of these players in for this price, then brilliant. But if he comes in and we go all scattergun and sort of sign people for the sake of it without a plan and say we're competing for, like Mick said, title or top four, it could derail the whole season. And sometimes it works, like when we sold Coutinho, but we knew that we were getting Van Dijk because we had that plan from the summer before. We knew we needed a keeper. We knew we needed all these different positions, and we already had players on the radar, like Navigator. That was agreed well in advance. If we know who we want, if we know the areas we want to strengthen, and we know the players that we need, then yes, but not if it's going to be a detriment to the season. Because it's all well and good saying we could get this player and this player, but say if we drop out of the top four, so we might not get those players because they might want Champions League football and we can't give them it. And so it's. I'd say yes if we're in a position where we're really struggling, but if we're doing really, really well and there's no plan in place, then no.
Yeah, it does depend very, very much on how we see ourselves at the end of January or towards the end of January. If we've imploded, and touch wood, it doesn't happen. If we've completely imploded and we're well outside the top four, and we see it as a struggle to get back in form and get back there, it could be time to try and cash in early and get an extra 50 million out of them, and then try and start spending that from that point. But it would still be a very hard pill to swallow. A couple of the questions that have come through in the chat that I found very interesting is Jim Hughes is one here. I'll get to that one in a second. And Dana Jacks is another one here. So this is actually a question in relation to Salah, because it's actually interesting purely because of how close he is to the top 10 all-time Champions League scorers. He's not. How many goals has Salah got this season so far? He's got one or two? Two. He's 8 away from being in the. Well, he's 8 or 9 away from being in the top 10 all-time Premier League scorers. So I think he's going to break that record this season. Something that Dana mentions here is, do you think he, as in Mo Salah, would want to stay if we manage to qualify for UEFA Champions League and get a second place? We all know that he wants to play in that UEFA Champions League, though. Do you think we throw an extra year on to him, or do we let the deal run out? If we get Champions League next season and he sees he could be in the top 10 of Champions League all-time goal scorers, I'll throw it to yourself first, Mick. Do you think he stays if he can sniff that record, or do you think he's gone next summer regardless?
I think the problem that we have is I think with 1 year left on his contract, I don't think Liverpool are going to offer him another one. At the money, he might want more, he might want the same, who knows. And I can't see Salah rejecting. If Liverpool accept a bid from Saudi, I can't see the money and what they're offering him. I can't see him rejecting that, regardless of Champions League or not. I don't think Liverpool are going to offer him like a 1 year extension or whatever. And I don't see us reject, if we accept a bid, him rejecting the offer that's been put on the table to him from it. That's my thinking on it anyway. I just don't see how what they offered him is report to have offered him is absolutely ridiculous. And I just don't see how anyone. It's 32 then as well. So, yeah.
I mean, he does. Father Time does not seem to have any effect on him whatsoever. Like I think he'd want one last dance. To be perfectly honest with you, in my own opinion, Mihai, would you be in agreement with that? Do you think if we get Champions League by the end of this season, do you think he'd be even tempted to stay, or is that generational wealth that Mick has been mentioning? Is that more of a draw away? Like, he's already won a Champions League. He's been there. He's scored in the final. He got the penalty for us and netted it against Tottenham. Do you think he stays at all? Is there any even hint of him staying if we get it, or do you think he's gone?
I think Mo is a lot more ambitious than people maybe think he is. So I would definitely he's been that type of a player that you don't really see leaving the club really soon. So it's like, even a few seasons ago when you were thinking maybe at some point we're going to lose him, you're rather thinking he'll go to, like a Real Madrid or Barca. Probably that's maybe not. I don't think he would go to PSG even. So it's complicated because now you have to kind of think it from his perspective. Like, you don't know what he wants. He is extremely ambitious, so I would definitely see him stay for another 1 or 2 seasons. But But then again, does he want to, I don't know, settle down in a Muslim country and play there for a bit? It's like, that's a decision I think it's going to be taken from like with him and his family. So it's going to be a thing decided within the family. So it's really complicated. I don't know what to say. I'm thinking purely from the financial perspective. If we get a 200 million offer, really hard to turn it down. Even 150 in next summer, So I don't know. Depends on him. Obviously, I'm not going to force him out or anything like that. So it's up to him, really.
It's just with that 1 year left. I think that's the big one with the 1 year left. After this season, he's only got 1 year left, and Liverpool are not going to want to lose him for free.
Yeah.
And are they going to offer him a 2-year contract at more money? So then he's 34. I just don't see it. That's my only thing. I just don't see Liverpool offering him a higher contract, even if he wants it.
It's such a complicated one, because you're looking at it from a point of view of essentially, and it's not to put this label on Salah at all, it's a passion versus money situation. And that's not to say that Mo Salah isn't passionate at all, because we clearly see how much he loves the team, loves Liverpool as a city, loves his family being there, and the city loves him back. And it's shown since he came in that he's opened eyes to his way of life and an awful thing as well, in a different way as well. And he's opened eyes to so many different things. And I know it's a bit of a cliche and maybe a little bit of a political thing to say, but it's been reported, it has been reported and shown that any racial element against the Muslim community ever since Mo Salah has arrived has dropped massively since he came in. And whether that has a direct correlation with him being there and the adoration that fans have for him in relation to that, Mo Salah is more than just a football player. And if he does go, obviously I'm not saying all of this will reverse, but if he does go, he is moving his brand as well as his play, well as his skills to Saudi Arabia. So he's moving to, I don't want to say more accepting, but I guess a more natural surrounding, purely because he'd be moving to a predominantly Muslim area that he would be the face of. And I think the offers that were being brought in for him was that he would have image rights and basically be the face of Saudi Arabian tourism, and the league itself. Like he would be their Neymar, or he would be the new Neymar. He would basically be what they wanted Cristiano Ronaldo to be. And realistically, from a selfish point of view, I think he takes the deal, and I wouldn't blame him for it. Not even one iota of blame would I place on Mo Salah in relation to that, because that is generational wealth, and that has set his family and his grandchildren and his grandchildren's children and his grandchildren's grandchildren up for their life. And that's 100 years worth of wealth that could be gotten in the space of 3 years. And any one of us would be stupid to turn that down, regardless of what the personal accolades could be. He could be very much thinking towards the future as he's entering the twilight years of his career. So I wouldn't be mad at him for going, but there's a whiff of it from the competitive point of view that he could be like, you know what, I'll stay for another year and I'll try and get in that top 10 and then go on his last sort of swan song. But it is a very good question for that, Dan. Thank you for that. And then the second last question that we're going to get on to here is more of a statement from Ant, where he reckons that he'll overstay his welcome and become CR7. For all of the things that I've just mentioned there, there's no way Mo Salah will ever overstay his welcome in Liverpool. There will be people that, if Mo Salah had to, people would give up their spare room for him to stay there. There's not a hope at all that Mo Salah would ever overstay his welcome in Liverpool, unless he came out and walked into Anfield wearing a United jersey like Michael Owen did. That's just not going to happen. The other thing that I've seen here is from Jay Muse in relation to some of the rumblings that we heard ever since the German manager, Flick, I believe his name is, got launched from a cannon from Germany's abysmal form. And Jay Muse asked the question of Klopp and the German national job. This will be the last question that we go through before we finish up, so I'll throw it around to everybody in the group chat. And I'll start with yourself, Mihai, in relation to this. Do you think Klopp, if that phone call comes, do you think Klopp is even answering it, or is he even going to consider it, or do you think he could actually do both?
From what I remember, I think ever since he was manager at Dortmund, he would like that job at some point. But see, the thing is, I don't think Jurgen thought he would love it as much as he does at Liverpool. Like, I think the whole football club and the whole city of Liverpool now he's in love with. And I think you can see that in all of his press conferences and in a lot of, in my opinion, frustration that he has with the owners. Because I feel like in a number of press conferences, I remember he was like saying, you know, he was asked about signing players for big money, and his answers were always like, this is what we do things, this is how we can do it, this is how we're gonna do it. He stayed even though he wasn't backed. And I think pretty much the whole reason he did stay was because of the fans and the club and the city. So I don't think he goes to the national team just because of this thing, but I could definitely see him go in a few years, maybe at the end of a contract. But it's complicated because you don't know what the situation is going to be then. I don't think he's in any rush though. So doing both, I don't think he can. I don't think anyone could. Like, that's just way too complicated. Like, you have a national team and then final tournament to prepare and the season with your club as well. Yeah, not gonna happen. So I think he stays, but I would actually love to see him coaching Germany at some point. Even though I don't like Germany very much, I'm gonna be a fan.
Yeah, I'd be very much the same as that. And something that Jamie mentions here, Lewis, is that Klopp for Germany in 2026 World Cup in the US and Mexico and Canada. Fair enough, it's a little bit too soon to have him go anywhere near the squad now with the Euros next year. Essentially, this time 12 months to be over. So it would really... Do you think he even answers the call, or would he even begin consider it? Do you think he's already been called about it? What are your thoughts on the possibility that he could be in that German team role as the head man there?
I mean, I think he could be. The big thing for his contract runs out in 2026, as is anyway. And he's always said that the main reason he'd want to step away for a bit is because of the demands of it. It's day to day, it's all the time. I think if you're a national team manager, you've got a bit more downtime. You know, there's months in between fixtures sometimes, weeks. Like, you get your own time. It's not as strenuous, obviously, with the World Cup and the Euros and stuff it is, but there's a lot of in-between bits. And I think the Klopp, who puts everything into it, having a job like that, where there's a lot more break in between, would be a lot more appealing to him. It's weird because he's better at developing players, and I don't know if a national team job suits them as such. It's the same with Pep Guardiola. Like, he gets them playing, but it's awkward when you can't buy in the players that you want to fit your system. If you're stuck with a team and none of them can do what you want them to do, it doesn't work. So I can see both sides. I think the Germany job would be what he does next. Would it be 2026? I don't really know. It's a bit, because I think his contract would end just before the World Cup starts. So would that be enough time for him? Would he say to him, right, we'll come back to you maybe straight after the tournament, we'll just get someone interim in just to get us through that? It's a bit of a weird one. I do think it'll be Germany next. I just don't know if it'll be 2026 or if he does take a year or two off and then goes to them.
Yeah, I reckon it'll be finish with us in 2026. Open the door for Xabi Alonso to come in and take over and take a year out, and then spend the next year with the German squad preparing for the Euros in 2028. I think that's probably the timeline that could be happening here. I don't even know what age Klopp is at the moment. He's what, 50s?
56 or something like that at the moment.
Yeah.
54.
So he'd be hitting the age of 60 by the time he's taken his year out and going on a gap year, for lack of a better term. Mick, do you even think he answers the phone call if he got called today, or is it that he's 110% focused on going forward? And to be honest with you, and if you think the stream is depressing, there's plenty of other streams you can watch. So we're not a depressing stream here. If you want to go watch a different stream, please feel free to go watch a different stream. We're not depressing on this channel. Mick, back to yourself in relation to the him moving on to the German squad. It very much does seem to have lined up with him being able to take a year out prior to the 2028 Euros and missing the World Cup in 2026. And then the stars seem to be aligning for that to happen. Do you reckon that's the sort of timeline that he's looking at, or do you reckon he might go sooner if the Liverpool squad isn't up to snuff?
I think he'll see out his contract till the end of 2020. I think the only thing that would force Klopp to leave before the end of his contract would be if, because I think everyone can see he's getting frustrated now with the lack of probably backing from the owners in the money department. He's not been able to sign players that he spend what he wants, and everyone knows now you can't spend 70 million in a transfer when other teams are spending 100, 200 million plus. It's just not really, it just doesn't work over a long period of time. But yeah, I think he will. If they keep progressing Liverpool, which I think they will. I think with the players, I think you can see a path of where they're going, what the next stage is for Liverpool. I think he'll see out his contract, and then I think he's not going to go because they're obviously going to need a manager for the World Cup. They're not going to say, all right, we're just going to bring a normal man, a random manager in to cover the World Cup, because Germany's ambitions will be to win the World Cup. And then they'll probably look at, and then he'll take that year, because Klopp Downs always takes a break after he's managed at Dortmund. He took a break when he managed at Mainz. He took a break because he puts so much. He puts 150% into it. He probably needs that break for a year, and then I think his next step probably will be the German manager, but probably towards the 2028 Euros. I'd say more than anything going towards like a World Cup in 2026.
Yeah, I reckon so as well. And my star boy is on the double with 2 goals, and that just absolutely breaks my heart, considering we could have gotten him for 40 million euro.
Oh,
that's genuinely absolutely fucking heartbreaking. Thanks for ruining my evening, Paul. I really, really appreciate that very much. Thank you. I mean, I'm happy for the kid. He's a fantastic baller, but he could have been fucking doing that for us. But we move on. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I'd like to thank, we had a good chunk of people in here watching us. Everybody for engaging in the chat as well. Thank you so much. It always makes the stream a little bit more interesting. From myself, Mick, Mihai, and Lewis, thank you guys so much for watching. And just before we finish, to make sure that if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe. If you have done that, make sure your notifications are on. And if they are, thank you so much, and we very much appreciate it. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow at 7:30. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you guys soon.